Welcome to It's Good to Be Smart. I'm your host, Dr. Dave Mulder. I love to learn new things, and I hope you do too, because it's good to be smart. Today we're diving into a topic that you might think sounds ridiculous, but it's actually a really important idea in studying life science. How do you know if something's alive? That might sound like a ridiculous question. I can almost hear you saying, "Come on, Dr. Dave, it's pretty obvious what it means to be alive." Everyone knows that living things eat and need oxygen, living things grow and reproduce and can die, so it's pretty easy to see that things like people, animals, plants, and even bacteria are all pretty clearly alive. And it's pretty easy to tell if things are not alive as well. Well, hold on just a second there. Let me give you an example. Consider fire. You might immediately think, seriously? Fire's obviously not alive. But isn't it? Fire eats. It obviously consumes things. Fire needs oxygen. If you remove all the oxygen, no more fire. So we can say fire can die then, right? Fire can certainly grow. And fire can reproduce as well. If you have one fire, you can have two fires. So all these things are characteristics of living things, right? Does this mean fire's actually alive? If it can do all the things living things do, why would we say fire's not alive? Let me set your mind at ease. Fire is not alive, but it does have quite a few characteristics in common with living things. So let's explore what characteristics all living things exhibit and why we should definitely consider fire non-living. First, let's take a quick detour to learn a $5 science word. There's a term we use when talking about living things, and that word is organism. An organism is any living thing, from the tiniest bacteria to the largest blue whale or giant redwood tree. The word comes from the Greek word organon, which means tool. Now that might sound strange, but here's why. Over time, it evolved to refer to any living thing that is made up of interconnected parts working together, much like tools in a machine. And that's the truth of it. All organisms are made up of a variety of parts with their own functions, from the parts that make up single-celled creatures to the organs that make up your body. Organisms can vary greatly in size and complexity, but all are made of cells and carry out the necessary processes for life. Whether simple or complex, anything alive is considered an organism. Now, there are many characteristics that all organisms have in common. Some of them are easier to notice and more obvious, but there are others that might not be quite as easy to notice. It's these more straightforward characteristics that fire also has in common. Here are a few easy-to-spot characteristics of living things. Living things need a source of energy. This is why living things need to eat. The nutrients in their food give them energy. And some living things can make their own food using sunlight. Plants. Other living things need to consume food to get their energy needs met. This would include things like animals, fungi, and even bacteria. Living things need raw materials. Oxygen's a great example. All living things except for a few kinds of bacteria need oxygen to help them break down their food. Other raw materials would include things like water and minerals. Some of these raw materials are also obtained through the food the organisms consume. Living things have a lifespan. This means that all organisms can die if they're injured or don't have the conditions needed to sustain life, such as not having the food, water, or oxygen they need. The idea of a lifespan also helps us see that there is a general length of time that we expect different types of organisms to live. For example, dogs generally have a lifespan of about 10 to 13 years. Flies have a lifespan of about 15 to 30 days. And giant sequoia trees have a lifespan of about 3,000 years. Living things grow and develop. Throughout their lifespan, living things usually get bigger, and they usually have normal changes to their bodies as well. We call this getting physically larger growth, and we call these normal changes development. Think about the changes that happen in a butterfly throughout its lifespan. It hatches out of an egg as a tiny caterpillar, and it first grows into a much larger caterpillar. Eventually, they go through a dramatic period of development inside a chrysalis to become a butterfly. That is one particularly dramatic transformation of development. But kittens growing and developing into adult cats, or bear cubs growing and developing into adult bears, and even human infants growing and developing into adults are examples as well. Think of it this way. It'd be really strange if babies didn't grow as they got older, but just changed to be tiny adults, right? And it would also be odd if babies just got a whole lot bigger, but their bodies didn't develop into adult forms. Growth and development are normal characteristics of all organisms throughout their lifespans. Living things reproduce. All organisms have a means of making more of that kind of organism, so that form of life doesn't disappear from our planet. There are a variety of ways that reproduction happens. Some simple creatures like bacteria and amoebas can just divide in half to create two new organisms. Many plants reproduce by creating seeds or cones. Animals can reproduce by laying eggs or by giving birth to live babies. The processes for creating offspring may be very different from each other depending on the type of organism, but reproduction is a characteristic of all living things. Okay, think about these 5 characteristics again as they might apply to fire. When we first talked about fire, it seemed like it did all the things organisms do, but what fire is really doing is quite different from a true living being. It's true that fire consumes things as it burns, but that really is quite different from the energy needs of a living thing. Likewise, it's true that fire needs oxygen to continue burning, but that's not the same as living things needing raw materials. The oxygen is needed to continue the chemical reactions that happen when things burn. Fire can die out if it doesn't have enough fuel or oxygen, but that really isn't the same as having a lifespan. And while fire can grow, that's only because there's more fuel for it to consume. It isn't growing and developing the way an organism does. And finally, fire can reproduce, but again, causing a second fire to start really isn't at all like living things reproducing to maintain the existence of that kind of organism on Earth. Truly, fire is just the visible evidence of a chemical reaction taking place. The light we see and the heat we feel from fire is the release of energy as oxygen and a fuel source are combined. Fire is not an organism. If you aren't yet convinced about fire, let's look at a few other characteristics of all organisms that might not be quite as obvious at first glance. Living things are made of cells. A really important distinction of all organisms is that each organism is made up of one or more cells. A cell is the basic unit of life, the smallest structure that can carry out all the functions necessary for an organism to live. It's the building block of all living organisms, ranging from simple single-celled organisms like bacteria to complex multicellular ones like humans. Cells contain essential components that help them perform vital processes like getting energy from food, managing growth, and directing reproduction. Living things can regulate themselves. All organisms have some means of keeping themselves in some normal range for different aspects of their life. We call this keeping themselves normal homeostasis. Homeostasis is about regulating stable internal conditions, such as adjusting the amount of water inside their cells, or altering how quickly the cells use oxygen. Some animals, and humans too, can regulate their bodies by maintaining a consistent body temperature, which is another great example of homeostasis. Living things respond to their environment. Organisms don't just float through life, they actually respond to the things happening around them. This might be easier to see in animals who move away from danger, but all organisms have a way of responding to their environment. For example, plants grow toward light, which is a straightforward way of responding to their environment to provide for their needs. Many reptiles respond to their environment by moving around. Since they can't regulate their body temperatures, reptiles will move into the sun if they're cold, or into the shade if they're getting too warm. And even single-celled creatures can respond to their environment by moving toward food sources or away from enemies. These kinds of responses might seem simple, but the truth is that these kinds of reactions are evidence of complex responses that are characteristic of all organisms. Living things have adaptations that make them better able to survive in their environment. All organisms have characteristics called adaptations, which are special features or behaviors that help the organism survive and thrive in their environment. Some adaptations are physical, like the thick fur of polar bears that helps them stay warm in cold climates, or the long neck of a giraffe that allows them to reach high leaves for food. Other adaptations are behavioral, like birds migrating to warmer regions during the winter. Essentially, adaptations allow organisms to better meet the demands of their surroundings and increase their likelihood of survival and reproduction. These more complex characteristics make it even more obvious that fire is not an organism, right? Fire can't regulate itself. Fire doesn't really respond to its environment to protect itself. Fire doesn't have adaptations to make it more likely to survive. And of course, fire is not made of cells. It's quite a list, isn't it? But this is one of the cool things about studying living things. A list of common characteristics like this can help us identify organisms. Before we wrap up, here are a few incredible facts about some interesting organisms. Electric eels have a pretty amazing adaptation. They can generate electrical pulses of up to 600 volts. This ability helps them hunt prey and defend themselves, as well as navigate by detecting electrical fields in their surroundings. The Venus flytrap is a kind of plant that actually eats insects. A Venus flytrap can snap shut in less than 1 second when its sensitive trigger hairs are touched twice by an insect. This incredibly fast response helps the plant capture prey for nutrition. Some fish living in the icy waters of Antarctica, like the aptly named icefish, have a cool adaptation. They have antifreeze proteins in their blood. These proteins prevent their blood from freezing even in sub-zero temperatures, allowing them to survive in extreme cold. And some bacteria, like those found in deep-sea hydrothermal vents, can create their own food from chemicals that come out of the vents. They convert chemicals like hydrogen sulfide into energy, which provides them with a means of making food in environments without sunlight. Okay, let's sum it up. We can recognize living things by understanding that they have characteristics that we can identify. Some of these are easier to notice, like the need for an energy supply, a need for raw materials, a lifespan, growth and development, and reproduction. Other factors are a little harder to notice at first, but they're also key characteristics that all organisms share, such as being made of cells, regulating themselves through maintaining homeostasis, responding to their environment, and having adaptations to make them more likely to survive. These characteristics help us to recognize the living things in the world around us and can help us determine the difference between living and non-living things. Thanks for joining me in this episode, and nice work leveling up your brain power today. Remember, smart isn't something you are, it's something we become as we're learning. So keep listening, keep learning, and keep getting smarter every day. It's Good to Be Smart is created and produced by me, Dr. Dave Mulder, with the support of the National Science Foundation through the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program. Subscribe to this feed so you'll never miss an episode, and check out our home on the web, goodtobesmart.com. Until next time, keep asking questions, stay curious, and keep learning, because it's good to be smart.